Hello, this is Todd Dunn for Life on the Edge. This video is the 5th video in my RV solar power series. In this video, I'm going to be talking about batteries. I'm going to start out today by talking about what kinds of batteries are available for use in an RV connected to a solar system. Basically, there are two kinds of batteries: lead-acid batteries and lithium-ion batteries. Let's look at lead-acid batteries first. They're available in 6 volt or 12 volt. You want a 12 volt system, but two 6 volt batteries can be combined in series to make a 12 volt battery. 12 volt batteries are available as what are called flooded or wet cells, gel cells, or AGM or absorbed glass mat batteries. Wet cells come in 3 varieties: starting batteries, which are basically automotive starting batteries that you might find in a car or truck; deep cycle batteries, which are designed specifically to be able to draw down significantly from full charge without damage; and dual purpose batteries, which are sort of a compromise between starting batteries and deep cycle batteries. The other type of battery that's available is a lithium-ion battery. They're available in a wide variety of voltages. 6 and 12 volts are common. You can get higher voltages, or you can go down to 3 volts. They have many different chemistries, so there are lots of different kinds of lithium-ion batteries. For RV use, the kind that's most common is a lithium iron phosphate battery. These are relatively safe, and they're good for RV or marine use. Before I go into the details of either lead-acid or lithium-ion batteries, I'm going to do a quick comparison. For the purposes of this comparison, I'm going to be looking at a 100 amp hour battery. The factors that I'm going to be looking at are weight, battery capacity, depth of discharge that you can go to without damaging the battery, the number of usable cycles of discharge and charge that the battery can be put through, how long it takes to recharge the battery, and finally, the cost of the battery. Okay, let's look at lead-acid batteries. A 100 amp hour lead-acid battery, depending on the quality of the battery that you buy, is going to weigh somewhere between 55 and 75 pounds. Capacity for lead-acid batteries decreases with increasing current draw. So if you're running your lead-acid battery at a 5 amp draw, you should be able to get pretty nearly the entire 100 amp hour capacity out of it. However, if you increase the draw to 100 amps, like you might get if you're running your microwave oven, you're probably only going to get about 60% or 60 amp hours out of your 100 amp hour battery before it's completely flat. And this is a very rapid drop off in capacity with increasing amp draw on the battery. Discharge percentage or depth of discharge, well, if you want your battery to last for a while, you should never discharge it much below about 50%. That means your 100 amp hour battery really is only good for about 50 amp hours. Also, in this respect, the lower your discharge percentage, or the smaller your depth of discharge is, the longer your battery will last, the more cycles you'll get out of it. So if you can only draw your battery down 20%, it'll last a lot longer than if you routinely draw it down 50%. How many usable cycles do you get from a lead-acid battery? Well, it varies with the type of battery, and we're talking only about deep cycle batteries here. There's quite a range of quality in lead-acid batteries, and you're probably going to get anywhere typically from about 400 to 700 discharge charge cycles, going to 50% discharge. If you go to less, you might be able to push that up to double. Charging. Lead-acid batteries can't be charged very quickly. Flooded batteries are the slowest to charge, and you're probably looking at 10 to 12 hours to charge a discharged flooded battery from, say, 50% discharge back up to full charge. Maybe a little bit less for an AGM battery. Furthermore, charging efficiency for lead-acid batteries is only about 75%. What about cost? There's quite a range depending on if you're buying a cheap flooded battery. If you do that, you're looking at about $100, maybe a little less. or a gel cell battery, which might run you $325, maybe even $350. An AGM battery will be about $275. Now let's look at lithium-ion batteries. Weight. Well, they're a lot lighter than lead-acid batteries. We're looking at 28 to 30 pounds for a 100 amp hour battery. So you're saving anywhere from 50 to 60% of the weight. What about capacity? All batteries have less capacity at high amp draws, but in the case of lithium-ion, they can put out very high amp draws and only lose about 10 to 15% of their capacity. Depth of discharge. With a lithium-ion battery, you can go to 100% discharge. Just run right till the battery is dead and then recharge it. It won't hurt it very much, although some of the manufacturers suggested that you really don't want to go much below 80% depth of discharge if you want to get maximum life out of the battery. That brings us to the number of usable discharge charge cycles. With lithium-ion batteries, I've seen numbers from 2,000 to 4,000 cycles. 2,000 cycles is about 6 years of daily use. 4,000 cycles is 10 to 12 years. So these batteries should last quite a long time. Charging. It's fast. You can charge a 100 amp hour lithium-ion battery at 100 amp charging current, and since they charge at about 98% efficiency, you can recharge the battery in 1 to 2 hours. So these batteries are lighter than lead acid. They have a much smaller loss of capacity. If you have a larger amp draw, you can discharge them more completely. You get a lot more cycles out of them, and they charge quickly and are very efficient in charging. So you don't have to have extra solar capacity to compensate for battery charging inefficiency. What's the downside? Well, cost. The cheapest 100 amp hour lithium-ion battery that I was able to find online was around $1,200 to $1,300, and they go up to $2,000 or more for that size. So these batteries are really expensive compared to the cheapest lead-acid batteries, anywhere from 12 to 13 to maybe 25 or 30 times the cost. This is offset by some of the factors, particularly the depth of discharge and the number of usable cycles, but unless thinking really long-term in your battery purchase, the initial startup cost of going with lithium-ion may be an insurmountable barrier. Now let me summarize a little bit about lead-acid versus lithium-ion. First, let's look at the cost per usable amp hour of the battery, which will take into account depth of discharge, per cycle. In other words, how long the battery will last in terms of number of cycles. For lead acid, this works out to somewhere between half a cent to 1 cent per cycle. For lithium-ion, it works out to somewhere between 3/4 of a cent and 1.5 cents per cycle. This isn't a very big difference until you look at upfront cost. So let's look at upfront cost for a battery system with 100 amp hours of usable capacity. That means for lead acid batteries, 2 100 amp hour batteries, and for lithium ion, 1 100 amp hour battery. For the lead acid, we're looking at somewhere between $200 for the cheapest flooded lead acid battery, up to about $650 to $700 for gel cells, maybe $550 for AGM batteries. For lithium ion, again, $1,200 at the absolute minimum to $2,000, maybe even $3,000, depending on which batteries you buy. So it comes down to upfront cost and expected battery life. If you're thinking in terms of having the system, keeping your RV for 10 years or more, and you have the money available, lithium ion is clearly the way to go because you'll buy batteries once. On the other hand, if you don't have the money, or you maybe are thinking you may not have the RV for that long, then you should probably go with lead acid. If you want to go the absolute cheapest way, go with standard flooded deep cycle batteries, or if you have a little more money available and you maybe want to get an extra 15 or 20% of usable cycles out of them, then you could go with AGM batteries or gel cells. But really, it comes down to how much money do you want to spend up front when you're making your installation. And there is a big difference between lead acid and lithium ion. Now let's look at lead acid batteries in a little more detail. As I said earlier, lead acid batteries come in three varieties. They are automotive or starting batteries. These batteries are characterized by having more thinner plates to increase the surface area of the plates, which allows the batteries to put out short bursts of very high amperage output like you might use when starting an engine. However, they can be damaged by deep discharge, and ideally should not be discharged by more than 5 to 10%. So depth of discharge should be no more than 5 to 10%. The next type of battery is the deep cycle battery. Compared to starting batteries, these have fewer, thicker plates in the battery. It reduces the surface area so they cannot put out as high a current for a short time, but they can handle lower amp draws for a much longer time. They can be discharged repeatedly to 50% or so and still last, in the case of the best quality batteries, up to perhaps 1,000 discharge charge cycles. The other type of battery that you're going to come across is what's called a dual purpose battery. This battery is a compromise between an automotive or starting battery and a deep cycle battery. It will last longer than a starting battery in deep cycle use, but considerably less than a true deep cycle battery. So you really want to avoid dual purpose batteries, and you want to definitely avoid automotive / starting batteries. So basically what you want to get is true deep cycle batteries, and you have to make sure when you're buying your battery that that's what you're acquiring. Now I want to say as a final note, all lead acid batteries will last longer at lower depth of discharge. So if you need 100 amp hours per day, rather than buying two 100 amp hour lead acid batteries so that you can draw 100 amp hours out of the system without going below 50% depth of discharge, you might want to consider buying 3 or maybe even 4 batteries so that that 100 amp hours will only be 33% or 25% depth of discharge. The battery system will last considerably longer with the lower depth of discharge. Now that we've decided that we really need to buy deep cycle batteries, we need to decide what type of lead acid battery would be appropriate. We need to make a decision between flooded batteries, gel cell batteries, and AGM batteries. So let's look at those individually. Flooded batteries are called that because they have a liquid electrolyte, which is a mixture of sulfuric acid and water as the electrolyte. That's the liquid that's inside the battery. They're available in both open configurations with removable caps so that you can add water as needed, and sealed configurations, which are maintenance free. These are the cheapest batteries, and a 100 amp hour battery in this type will run you anywhere from about $85 to $120, depending a bit on where you buy it and the quality of the battery. In terms of quality, there are only a few major manufacturers of flooded lead acid batteries, and as long as you stick with one of the majors, you're probably okay. Gel cell batteries. Gel cell batteries are called gel cell batteries because the electrolyte, the sulfuric acid solution, has been gelled by the addition of fumed silica, which turns the liquid electrolyte into a gel. The advantage of that is that the gel stays put within the battery and doesn't move around, and consequently is very unlikely to leak out unless you actually break the case. These are all sealed batteries and can be used in any orientation. You can even turn them upside down. It doesn't matter. That's one of the big pluses of gel cell batteries. However, these are the most expensive batteries. A 100 amp hour gel cell battery is going to cost you anywhere from about $270 up to about $360, depending on where you buy it. Finally, AGM batteries. The AGM stands for Absorbed Glass Mat. It gets that name because the individual plates within the battery are wrapped in fiberglass matting and then packed together, and the electrolyte is added and it's absorbed into the matting, which holds it in place against the plate. So it can't slosh around, can't leak out. As a consequence, these batteries are all sealed and again can be placed in any orientation. They're intermediate in price between flooded batteries and gel cell batteries, but the price is a lot closer to gel cell batteries than it is to flooded batteries, ranging from around $200 at the cheapest up to $250 to $275 at the high end. I would like to note, though, that all sealed batteries do have overpressure vent ports on them, so that if you overcharge the battery, which will cause the battery to emit hydrogen gas, that hydrogen gas will be vented out of the port to prevent the battery from basically exploding. If you do that with a sealed battery, that emission of hydrogen gas is irreversible. It's gone from the system and it will cause the capacity of the battery to decrease. So you want to avoid overcharging sealed batteries. Now let's look at the pros and cons of the different types of lead-acid batteries. First off, let's look at the flooded batteries. What are the pros? Well, cost. That's the biggest one by far, because they're the cheapest batteries. Also, they're available everywhere. You have no trouble finding flooded lead-acid deep cycle batteries. What are the cons? You get the lowest number of usable discharge charge cycles out of a flooded battery. It's not a lot less, and particularly for some of the higher quality batteries, it's not significantly less than AGM batteries. Outgassing can happen if you overcharge them, so they will emit hydrogen gas, and they're also, if you really overcharge them a lot and get them quite hot, you can get a little bit of sulfuric acid vapor out, which is unpleasant and can be corrosive to the environment. And if you knock them over, they can spill sulfuric acid, which is a pretty big negative. What about gel cell batteries? They give you a higher number of usable cycles, discharge charge cycles, than flooded batteries. They're vibration resistant because the electrolyte is fixed on the plates by being gelled, so you don't get vibration causing sulfate deposits on the plates to settle to the bottom of the battery, which reduces capacity, which does happen with flooded batteries if they are vibrated quite a bit. You don't get any outgassing with gel cell batteries unless you grossly overcharge them. Then you lose hydrogen gas, maybe a little sulfuric acid vapor, and you get an irreversible reduction in capacity. They also can be used in any orientation. So if you're constrained about where to put them, you can lay them on their sides. You can even put them in upside down, although that might cause some problems with connections. What are the cons? These are the most expensive batteries. They're subject to overcharging damage, as I mentioned, and they're harder to find. Gel cell batteries are probably the most difficult to find. What about AGM batteries? They give a higher number of cycles than flooded batteries, probably the highest number of cycles, but the difference might not be huge if you get very high quality flooded batteries. Like gel cells, they're resistant to vibration because the electrolyte and the surface of the battery is protected by the absorbed glass mat. Again, no outgassing unless you grossly overcharge them. You can use them in any orientation, and they are more available routinely than gel cell batteries. What are the cons? Well, cost. They're about twice as expensive as flooded batteries, but still less than gel cell batteries. So you have to balance these various pros and cons off when you're making a choice of the particular type of lead acid battery that you're going to use in your system. The final consideration for lead acid batteries is to go with 6-volt batteries or 12-volt batteries. As I mentioned earlier, both are available. So what are the pros and cons of 6 and 12-volt batteries? Let's look at 6-volt batteries first. The pros are simple. They give the highest number of cycles of any type of lead acid battery, particularly if you buy what are called golf cart batteries. These are very high quality, deep cycle batteries that can give you as much as 12 to 1500 cycles. What are the cons? Well, with a 6-volt battery, you need at least 2 batteries, and you have to wire them in series to get 12 volts. So that's going to make your purchase more expensive. The cheapest 6-volt batteries run around $125 each, so you're going to be paying at least $250. So they're more expensive than 12-volt batteries. Furthermore, if one of your 2 6-volt batteries should fail for some reason, you really should replace both of them. That is an additional cost. Since you have to wire the batteries together in series, there's a little bit more complex wiring, which adds a little bit to the cost. They're considerably less available than 12-volt batteries, and if you want to add capacity to your battery system, you have to buy at least 2 batteries. So you have to have 2 batteries, 4 batteries, 6 batteries, 8 batteries. You cannot have an odd number of batteries. Now let's look at 12-volt batteries. What are the pros? Well, one, they're available everywhere. Pretty much any place you can buy batteries will have 12-volt deep cycle batteries. They're the least expensive by far. And you can get away with one 12-volt battery for the smallest systems. So you might be able to only spend $100 on batteries. Simple wiring, unless you're going to have multiple batteries where you have to wire them in parallel, you simply have to hook up the positive and negative. And it's easy to add more capacity. You can just buy another battery. Ideally, it should be the same size and capacity as the battery that you're pairing it with, and just wire it in parallel, positive to positive, negative to negative. What about the cons? Well, there's quite a bit of variability in quality by brand. There are some batteries that are labeled deep cycle that aren't, and you really want to avoid those. But as I said earlier, if you stick with major brands, major manufacturers, you're probably going to be okay. And also, in terms of the number of usable discharge charge cycles, 12-volt batteries are going to be a little bit less than 6-volt batteries. Potentially quite a bit less than the best 6-volt batteries. So let me summarize the whole thing about batteries. If money isn't a factor, then the best bet is to go with lithium-ion batteries. They're lighter, you get the most cycles, you can draw them down all the way. They're physically smaller than lead-acid batteries. They're just overall better. However, they're really expensive, as I've noted before. If you can't afford lithium, then go with 6-volt AGM batteries, golf cart batteries. These are heavier than lithium-ion batteries, but you get the most usable discharge charge cycles of any type of lead-acid battery. If you don't like 6-volt batteries, you don't want the added complexity of wiring the batteries in series, replacing them as pairs, etc., you could go with 12-volt AGM batteries. This will give you almost as good a performance as the 6-volt batteries, not quite as many cycles of discharge charge, i.e. they won't last as long, but still good value. If money is a bit tight, you can still go with flooded 6-volt golf cart batteries and get almost as good a result as you will with 6-volt golf cart AGM batteries for perhaps half the cost. And if you really want to be cheap and you don't like 6-volt batteries, you can go with standard 12-volt flooded deep cycle batteries. This is the cheapest option. You will replace your batteries a little bit more often, but you'll probably be able to get anywhere in the neighborhood of 4, maybe even 5 years if you size your battery bank appropriately so that you don't draw it down more than 50% and preferably more than about a third. So you might have to put out a little bit more money to buy an extra battery or two, but flooded 12-volt deep cycle batteries will be your cheapest option. Which you go with really is a function of how much money you have and your preferences for the system. All of them will work, and you'll probably be quite happy no matter what you choose. And it's just, as I said, a question largely of preference and money. Okay, thank you very much. I hope this has been useful and informative. If so, please click the thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, click thumbs down. But please comment and tell me why so I can improve my next video. And if you want to get information about when my next video in this topic or any other topic is coming out, please subscribe to my channel. My next video in this series is most likely going to be about inverters, and it should be out in a few days. Thank you very much.